Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Quality, the podcast. My name is Hemish, and since 2023, I've been interviewing some of the most talented and well-respected quality leaders in the pharma and biotech industry to learn how they got to where they are now. This season is all about our guests and their journeys. Why they got into science, how they got into quality, their biggest challenges and greatest learns, and the highs and lows along the way. Every week, I'll be bringing you a new guest with the purpose of inspiring the next generation of quality leaders. Welcome to Season 2. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi all, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Quality. Today I'm joined by someone who's making history on the show. It's our first ever returning guest. Last time we had a fascinating conversation about leadership, career growth, navigating the world of quality and in particular QC. So I'm delighted to have Brian Nunnally, who has recently been promoted to Enterprise QC Head of CSL. So he's driving change across the entire QC organization. Today we're going to talk about mentorship, why it's critical for career development, how lateral moves accelerated Brian's career, and how Brian's journey has shaped his leadership approach. So really excited to have Brian back on the show. Let's get into it. 3, 2, 1, go.
That's right.
There we go. Morning, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing good, Hemish. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's the first time actually that I've got a previous guest coming on for the second time. I just realised as we were talking.
I get to be the first. That's a big honor. Wow, enough that you want me back. So I appreciate that. Glad to.
The first episode did so well, so could not bring you back, Brian. And you've had some pretty cool achievements in the last year. I think it was about a year ago now we did the podcast.
I think it's something like that. I think that's about right. Yeah.
Yeah. How are things going?
Well, it's going great.
Has life materialized since we last spoke?
Oh my gosh, boy, lots of changes since we last spoke. I think when we last spoke, I was in charge of the Securus portion of CSL's QC business, and since that time, I have been promoted, and I'm actually in charge of the entire QC business for CSL. And my official title is Enterprise Quality Control Head for CSL. Which is really cool. What it means is it gets a chance to collaborate amongst the various business units that we've got at CSL and really try to bring one approach to the entirety of that. So it's really exciting. I mean, there's so much to do yet, but it's a great opportunity, of course, to learn all the parts of the business that we have and really kind of contribute. Again, bring some of the things that I've done in my career and things that I'm excited about to a larger audience.
Yeah, amazing. And what does the change like from a sort of a practical standpoint from your previous role? How does it change in the immediate future?
Well, I think the biggest and most obvious change is now there's parts of the business that we do that I'm going to get exposure to that really I had some exposure in the past, but I have a more direct control in this case. And so what really the practical aspect is, as we looked at things, and you might remember we talked about variability reduction and focus on safety and these kind of things, that I get to bring that across the entirety of the network. And it's a very consistent approach from a company perspective. So we can think about things rather than as a division, you think about things as a company. And that's a very different proposition because I think you really, the scale is what helps you more than anything else. And that's what I'm excited about, is that opportunity to really have that effect across the entire business.
Yeah, awesome. Well, do me a favor, Brian, just for the listeners and people that may or may not have listened last time, just give a real quick overview of what your role is in terms of your title and just a very brief introduction.
Sure. So, one of the things that is people will look at my my bio on LinkedIn or something like that, they'll see that QC has been in my blood. I started in a QC group in my first job, and I remember this is one we'll probably talk about this a little later. But when I first came into industry, I worked under a man named Alan Dinner, who was the global head of quality for Lilly at the time. And Alan was a PhD analytical chemist who worked on insulin products. Or had worked on insulin products. Well, I was a PhD analytical chemist who was working on insulin products. I looked at Alan and I said, that's what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be a vice president of quality at a pharmaceutical company. And really to come at 27 years later to realize that as the actual thing that has happened to me. So I am, in charge of all of the quality control unit for CSL, and that encompasses your kind of standard things that you would do in quality control, lot release testing, as well as supporting the the buildings in terms of with data, environmental monitoring, water, testing, utilities monitoring. So that kind of aspect of that, but it also has a function that supports our R&D in trying to bring molecules from development into commercial, and that phase 3 to commercialization process, as well as the other kind of parts that you miss about this, reference standards and stability, and being able to we test stability. Obviously, that's a real important part, as well as looking at our improvement initiatives and continuous improvement. I think that's something I'm real excited about, is how do we find ways to improve across the entirety of the business. We have a lot of people that are very dedicated to taking the things that we do and making them even better, right? Improving the variability, improving the technology. These are very important aspects of quality control that I think a lot of people don't think about.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, congratulations on the bigger role as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And last time we spoke, we spoke a lot about your early career and how moving into different lateral moves, particularly, really sort of accelerated your learning and development, and probably helped you get to where you are now.
No question. Yes,
because you got a fairly varied degree of experience in different scenarios and stuff. But and we touched on a bit about mentorship, and one of the things that we're going to talk about today is that really delving into that sort of mentorship and leadership aspects, and the role that mentors have played in your career. We're obviously launching a mentor scheme soon, and you've kindly agreed to be one of those mentors.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people that are early, particularly in the QC realm, that are maybe manager level, associate director, that are in that QC space, and are probably thinking about, what does their future look like? What does their career path look like? Do you go, do you stay in QC and try to become a head of QC one day? Do you try and transfer into a wider quality role? So I get to speak to a lot of people who have that kind of question in their head. But I guess let's sort of let's take it back a bit. When you were sort of growing up, I suppose, in your career, you mentioned there you wanted to be a vice president of quality one day. Like, what did you aspire to be as you were going through your leadership career, and like, was QC the kind of natural path that you wanted to take?
It's funny. One of the things that I think I've been struggling a little bit with, frankly, is to think about this being something that I fully planned. Because that it seems like that. You hear that from the story of, I aspired to be this and now I am that. And that I had this plan that everything worked out exactly as I would expect. No, couldn't be further from the truth. But I think there was a North Star. There was a principle behind it that I think I did achieve. And that really was, I considered everything that I was doing in context. So for me, it wasn't so much, I knew what I wanted to be, right? I knew what that was in the end. And so every move I made was in context of, how does it fit within that overall goal? It was always that thought process that, if you want to do this, what do I have to do that's going to enable me to do that? And I don't think I ever really strayed from that thought. And knowing, it didn't know it was going to be quality control that was going to take me there. I actually thought I would have had to have done more in quality assurance than I did. But I ultimately knew that was where I wanted to go. So every move that I made was in that context. And I think that's what I would encourage people to do as you think about those moves. Really kind of consider, what is it going to get you what you need to do that? I'll give you an example. From a quality control perspective, one of the most valuable things I did in my career was going through a stint where I was in technical services for the manufacturing process. So I didn't have any quality control, any quality for that matter, in my title or remit. that I had to work with manufacturing investigations. I had to go on the floor with the operators and see the process as it was being done. I work with process validation and talk about how we are confirming that a process is going to be appropriate for its intended purpose. Couldn't be further from the analytical realm as you could imagine. But there was still that analytical aspect to it, right? We still made measurements, right? There were measurements that were being made both on the floor, and that was, important and interesting to me, as well as coming from quality control. So here I was on the other side of the fence. I was receiving the data from quality control.
Yeah.
And for me, that was really interesting because I had a chance to see how the measurements that we were making affected the people that were using them.
Yeah.
And that perspective has not been lost on me. So as I sit here in quality control now, and I am servicing, this larger population of people that are using the measurements that my folks are making, that's where the variability passion comes from. Is I want us to be the best because our customers, our stakeholders deserve for us to be the best. And so that's what's exciting for me is that aspect of even when I looked at that, I knew that going to that role was going to be very important in the end. If I was going to be in that position I wanted to be in, that North Star I had, I knew that going through that experience was going to be very valuable, and learning that perspective was going to be important. And so if I was coaching someone, they said, I really want to be the head of quality control, VP level or whatever level, even just in charge of a quality control unit, say at a site, I would 100% recommend that you spend some time in tech services, manufacturing, some site away where you have to deal with the consequences of the measurements being made by quality control, so that you can really look and say, now I really understand what my stakeholders are going to deal with.
Yeah. So paint a picture. Just take us back then. What stage of your career was that when you were sort of going into technical services?
It was relatively early in my career.
Okay.
So I started off in a quality control improvement laboratory. We call it the Technical Excellence Center at the time. Okay. That was I loved that title for it. So I had done that. I'd also been in R&D. I'd gone back into R&D, which again, I was another thing I really advise someone that wanted to do quality control would be to do is spend some time in R&D. Great chance to see that development, what you go through to get to the point of an actual commercialized product. I really valued my experience there. So I'm probably in about year 10 of my career, maybe. So pretty early. I was at the associate director level, so a significant enough leadership responsibility that I was able to be involved with what was going on at the entire site, so not just in a small microcosm. I don't think that matters. Frankly, I don't think it matters whether you are, a manager level, in terms of that. If we're thinking through the management track, I don't think it matters whether you're at that level or you're higher up. I think the key is getting that experience, and I think you get that experience at any level. But one of the things I think that it's important for people as well is it's easy to get locked into a function and to stay in that function until you get pretty high up. And then it's harder to move as you get further and further up. It's kind of the middle ground is where it's really tough to move. It's like easy to do when you get really at a very high level, because the expectation is that we could pick you up and move you into a lot of areas and you could be very effective. At the lower levels, again, the same kind of thing. We can move you around and you bring some technical aspect to it. It's that middle area that it can be kind of tough, because you're expected to have some technical responsibilities, but you're expected to have leadership as well. So I definitely advise, if you're going to do it, try to do it earlier in your career, because that's the time where you get to learn the most, and you can. And frankly, this is where I'll say it is: you get to screw up the easiest. Yeah. Right. You can go through and you can make a mistake, and the impacts tend to be a little more narrowed and recoverable. When you get up to a certain level, you make some mistakes. It can be catastrophic.
Yeah.
So I think it's good. It's good to get that experience and to get that practice and understanding at the lower level, so that way when you get to those higher levels, you can really understand the consequences of your decisions.
Yeah. Do you think though, when you're at that level, like manager, associate director, whatever it is, the early-ish part of your career, people would just want to progress. They want to get the next promotion. They want to get to director. They want to get to more senior, progress up the ladder. But do you think was it a frustration for you to make those sort of lateral moves at the time? And like at the time, did you see the bigger picture?
I tell you what's funny. You people would think that you actually, you and I talked about these questions beforehand. That you would ask the perfect question, and you did ask the perfect question. It's why you're a good interviewer. It's why I enjoy doing this with you. Because you asked the right question, and I'd like to tell you no, that I saw that North Star, and I always knew that I was doing it, and the next step was the right answer. And no, I was incredibly frustrated, and it really was. And the reason why it was frustrating was that I had a lot of people who were telling me I was doing a great job. And they were saying, you're doing great. We think we see big things in you, Brian, and just be patient and we'll get that. Patience has never been one of my strong qualities, I will admit. And so it was that aspect of being patient that I didn't really appreciate, and that I can look back in hindsight, and I spent a lot of time at the associate director level. I did a lot of different associate director gigs, and there was a time where I was beginning to wonder if I would ever break through. Right? Would I ever get that director job? And it was frustrating. I was frustrated, and it made me make decisions that maybe were a little quick. I did move around companies a couple of times, and I probably could have stayed and been a little more patient. Maybe that would have changed things. Who knows what the path not taken, as Robert Frost would say, right? Who knows what really would have happened there? But from my vantage point, I can look back in time now and say that it was great. I got a lot of different experiences and a lot of many different lateral moves that really extended my breadth. So instead of having this very narrow focus, now I had this very big focus. I had a regulatory focus. I had a R&D focus. I had a manufacturing focus. Oh my gosh, when I'm looking at right now today, all of those things together have made it really valuable for the decisions I have to make in the meetings that I'm in, the people that I work with. Boy, it's been fantastic to have had that experience and have that background. Was it incredibly frustrating at the time? You're darn right it was. And when I tell you what, when I did break through, when it did happen, it happened quick then at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, going from that first director job all the way to VP right now was, I think around 7 years. So, I mean, that's a lot of levels in a very short amount of time. And it was because I had done so much at that associate director level. I had done so many different assignments that it enabled, when the time came, the only thing I was lacking was the leadership experience and the leadership growth that you get at each level. That's what I was lacking, and that's what I was getting. I didn't have to get the other experiences in the other areas. So that's why I think it was able to happen quick for me when it did.
Did you have people management responsibilities when you were doing those sort of moves into the different functions? Because I'd imagine when you're frustrated in your career that you're not getting to director, and then you're also managing people, that can be a tough role because you're managing people and you're frustrated in your own journey. Yeah,
and I think that brings up a good point, and I'll take a little aside on here. Is I did a couple of stints where I went as individual contributor. Right. Now, I always wanted to be, you heard me, I wanted to be a VP. That was what I wanted to do. That was my North Star. So there were some times where I decided to do individual contributor, or very limited amount of people reporting to me, say 2 even, a small amount of people. Did that a couple of times in my career because the opportunity to learn was big at that point. Once you've kind of been a supervisor, people kind of assume that you can do it. So as long as you don't stay out too long, it's not a problem. So absolutely. For me, getting a chance to kind of go and have that experience, even as an individual contributor, absolutely should do that. Yeah. So, but to get back to your kind of question of that frustration and that, people responsibility aspect, I absolutely did have people responsibility through most of that experience. And, we've talked about one of my, my aspects of my leadership is believing in authenticity. And believing that you need to bring your authentic self to work, you bring your authentic self as a leader, that if you compromise that, you really kind of compromise everything, really. People naturally gravitate towards authenticity. Again, it's why I love these podcasts and this information that we're doing here is because, this is you and I being real, right? This isn't produced, and this isn't a script that I'm reading off of. This is just you and I being real. And I think that people appreciate that in leadership as well.
Yeah.
That being said, that frustration that I had doesn't belong with everybody, right? My people that worked for me didn't need to see me frustrated in my personal career. That doesn't mean I had to hide that. And if people would ask, what are you thinking about for your career, that I would answer them dishonestly.
Yeah.
But it would say that I didn't try to bring that to the forefront, right? My frustrations that I had, I tried to keep to myself as my frustrations, or to vent to a manager, or a manager, or a mentor, right? To help that person express that frustration and help me. How do I channel that frustration into positive action? Because that's the real key, right? Is how you deal with frustration isn't about the emotion of the frustration. It's about how do you turn that frustration into action? How do you make something productive out of that? Sitting around bemoaning the fact that I can't break through and that everything seems to be, I'm not being patient enough, or, things aren't happening for me. What does that do? Right? I mean, other than a little catharsis, which can be valuable, mind you, other than a little catharsis, that doesn't really do you anything.
Yeah.
But if it turns into, well, maybe I need to get a mentor, or maybe I need to find someone that's going to help me with learning more about this area, which will help to get me more prepared. Or maybe I go and job shadow or talk with someone about what they're doing. If you turn that into action, then that frustration now becomes a value and becomes an asset instead of a liability.
Yeah, it's perception. Yeah, it's exactly that. It's how you deal with the situation. You can either decide to, complain and quietly quit and complain to everyone that will listen to you, or or you deal with it yourself. You complain upwards, or complain with a smile on.
Yes, exactly.
Face upwards. But you also want to. But it's a tricky one because if you're frustrated in your career, you need to be authentic and you need to help your people underneath you. But you also need to make sure you're showing the best, showing up the best way.
And that's exactly right. Showing the best of yourself, and that's so for me. Again, my nature is towards positivity. I think that anybody that knows me well knows positivity is not a problem for me. That being said, I get a question. I've had people ask me, "Do you ever get sad?" I was like, "Well, yeah, sure. I get frustrated. I get angry. I feel all the emotions that everybody else feels.
Yeah.
It's just I choose to be positive, and I choose that even in my darkest and most frustrated times, it was still with an air of positivity. That look, okay, let's see where I'm at now. Let's really kind of take stock. Take a step back for a second and take stock about where I'm really at with my career. And look, I've been very successful at every step in my career, and I would say that realizing a dream of being a VP that's not the success. I don't view that as success. What I view instead as success is all the great, people that I've worked with, the mentees that I've had, the people that have worked for me that have gone on to big things and to realize their career goals, and the patients that we've helped with with medicines that I've worked on. That's the stuff that makes me proud. That's the stuff I look back on with pride and think through now. What have I done? And I talk about. That's the things I like to talk about. Achieving some title or something like that. That's a nice thing to think about now. But it really is. It's more than that, frankly. What it represents, really, frankly, is what I like to think about.
Yeah. And on the positivity piece, you can't, like you say, it's funny that you say people ask you, are you ever sad or frustrated? Because you're obviously such a positive person with a great positive outlook on the way that you see things. But you can't always be a 10 out of 10 in terms of your energy, and
that's right.
But you also can't go from a 10 to a 2 to back to a 10 to a 2. So you have to find that middle ground of an 8, or how you show up, in terms of the energy that you bring. We had Shane Ernst on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he was, his challenge was he was an introvert when he was, going through his leadership career, and it is an introvert, and he had to figure out, right, how do I be authentic, but how do I also show up when, and put on not put on, but come across in a friendly and talk to people and be energetic and act positively in front of your people. So it's finding that balance between being quiet, being loud, being happy, being too positive, but but also being yourself, which is a whole load of challenges.
And it really is true. And I have people will sometimes come to me and they'll come and say, I want to have you as a mentor. And when anybody asks me that question, my immediate question is why? Why do you want me as a mentor? What is it that you think I'm going to be able to do? And really to make sure, am I going to be able to do that? Someone comes to me and says, I want to learn how to be very detail orientated. Look, I'm not going to be that person, right? I'm a high level. I'm high level. I know I am. I know that's where my strength lies. And so I'm not the best mentor for you in that case. And I'll have people every now and then I'll come and say, look, I want to learn how to be like you. I want to be another you. And I'm like, oh God, the world doesn't need another me. But it really is, my comment to that always is exactly what you said, is exactly what Sean said as well, is be the best you that you can be. Yeah. Right? Don't try to be someone else. Be you. Be you and the best you that you can be. And that may mean being positive, like you said. That may be, that may mean being the person that is able to, find and see the flaws in things. That's a really valued skill, to be able to see how things won't work. Now, that being said, I will always say that you should have a bias towards the next step would be, and here's how we solve that. Right? Here's the problem that I see, and here's how we could solve that problem. I think that's where people get stuck a lot of times, or when people maybe feel a little bit of derailing that they in their careers. Is I think you always need to be the person that says we can do things, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you can't see the can'ts or that you can't see the problems. Love that you can see the problems. Like I said, I love surrounding myself with people that can see the problems, but I also want people that see the solutions to those problems. That is what the key is. And that's how you transition it. So I would encourage you, if you're one of those people that maybe you've heard feedback that says, hey, you're not positive enough, or you're not a can person enough. What's really probably missing is not you solving, is not the fact that you're not positive. It's that you're not offering the solutions when you see the problems, or you're not offering the path to the how we could do things, or how things could be different. That I think that's probably what's missing a lot of times.
Is that is that something that you think is inbuilt with people, where they have a problem but they try to come up with a solution, or does that get, I guess, do you learn that via mentors, via experience?
It's funny that you get the nature nurture kind of thing, right? That's essentially, is it part of our DNA, or is it something that we can learn? I tend to be a little on both sides on that. I'm going to take both positions. I'm going to be the ultimate politician on this one. That I think it's a little both. I do think what I bring in that positivity is natural. Like my dad's like this, right? My grandfather was like this. So I mean, there is, I think, a certain natural proclivity that can come from that. But I also believe it's a learned behavior. I believe that there is my mother used to say, you can get mad in the same pants you get sad in, or you can get happy in the same pants you get mad in. She would, whatever emotion she wanted to say. Her point was that you can choose your attitude. And I believe that, right? I believe that you can choose your attitude and choose how you're going to approach things. So the answer to your question is, I believe it can be trained. I believe that if you're in a situation where, like, maybe you're the natural person to find fault in things, great, fantastic. Leverage that as a skill. But leverage that as a skill that, train yourself to find the solution. So when you see a problem, it's about mind training, right? There's a lot of data and evidence, studies that say you can train your mind to do just about anything. Yeah. So if you see a problem, train your mind that I'm not going to bring up a problem unless I have a solution, right? If I can see this, I'm going to bring up a solution, or I'm going to bring up a way we could find out a solution. Because again, that may be hard to say, I find a problem, there is no solution to this. Great. Okay, that's still valuable, but maybe can you find a way that we could test that, or the way that we could, if we did this, we could see if there was a solution. Again, that's still moving the needle. You're not identifying the problem, you're moving towards a solution. And I think that's really the key for people. And you talk about an introvert, an example. That's certainly, as an extrovert, our challenge is to be quiet and to listen and do that. That's my challenge. Again, I always say there's no leadership phenotype. It really is. Yeah. You can be any personality and be a great leader. Yeah. But there are some things that you have to do a little more, right? If you're an introvert, you have to share your knowledge. You do have to share what you're saying, what you're thinking. and learn how to do that. And I'll coach an introvert, obviously, is to think about playing a role. Don't think about it as you. Think about it as the best you, and playing a role a little bit where you're offering what you're thinking, or you have to tell people what you're thinking, because especially like the people that work for you, they need to hear what you're thinking. And if you need time to process, it's fine to say, hey, I need time to process on this. But do say that out loud. And I think that's the key maybe for it, is that we miss sometimes, is we don't say that aspect. And so, you're going to have some aspects of our personalities require a little more coaching and a little more work to make them into positives. But I do believe just about any aspect of a personality can be made into a positive if you try.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. What just going back to, I guess, your sort of earlier days, in that sort of lateral move and all those frustrations that you had, did you have mentors at the time?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things, I like how you said mentors, because I think I don't recall if I said this in the first time, but I'll say it now for sure, is I don't believe in a single mentor. I don't believe in the single mentor theory. That there is one person that is somehow all-knowing in all things. You need many mentors, and they're helping you in different ways. And sometimes they're long-term and sometimes they're short-term. And even one session can be a mentor in a person. So yes, I was blessed with some great mentors along the way. I had some great supervisors who saw things in me that I didn't see in myself, and unlocked some things for me. I had some great mentors. Again, the same thing that I went to for some that said, I need help with this. Can you help me? And others that came to me and said, hey, I see potential in you. Would you like me to help you? And of course, the answer was always yes. Absolutely. If you're going to help me, that would be wonderful. So I think that finding people that do things that you need to do, or you need to grow, that are good at those things, oh my goodness, that's a great tool. And so I think one of the things, I study people all the time. And maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm always studying things. And it's not so much that I'm like trying to find fault or anything. It's exactly the opposite. I'm trying to find strengths. I'm trying to look at them and see things that they do well that I don't. And I love to hire people that do well, that are much better at things than I'm at. I had one person that said, when I told them that, they said, well, what am I good at that you're not? And I rattled off a whole bunch of things right off the bat that they were excellent at, much better than I am. I'm blessed with a staff right now that is way more talented than I am. And I have one person that I had worked for me at one point, works for me now as well. And they're wonderful in terms of their calmness. And I'm a very excitable kind of guy. And when I get excited and I'll come up with these really crazy ideas, they're really good at kind of evaluating those ideas and saying, yeah, that's a good idea. And let's think about this. What about this?
Back down to earth.
Brings me right back down to reality. And really what it does is it helps me make a better solution, right? That person doesn't take my idea and destroy it, but they're helping me craft it into a better version of itself. And when challenges are there, they're the one that are off to say, hey, let's break this down into a problem we can solve. And I really appreciate that. And honestly, it's why that person works for me again, is because, and I sought them out when I had an opening in particular, because I knew they were good for me. They helped me be a better leader. And frankly, I knew I could help them be a better leader too, because they're really good. And I knew the first time it worked out really well, and I wanted to see what had happened since that time. And I can say that person has really flourished again, because they're wonderful. They're really excellent. Yeah. That's no surprise.
But also that helps, when you two different types of personalities or two different traits.
Absolutely.
There, it balances things out quite well. It's probably a good reason why you work together quite well.
Absolutely, no question about it.
Yeah. So if I'm an aspiring leader, quality leader, and I wanted to get a mentor, I wanted to seek mentorship, whether it be mentor or mentors. What should I be? How would I go about it in terms of where's the starting point in terms of the self-analysis and what I need to work on?
And you hit the nail on the head. It's a self-analysis first. First thing I would say is decide what is it that you want. Okay, what do you want in the mentor? What are you trying? And when I say what do you want, I mean what are you trying to improve? What is it that is not working? What is it that, and again, this is another thing that I think people have the fallacy of, is they look at themselves and they say, what am I terrible at, or what am I weak at and I need to get better at? I don't disagree that we need to find, we need to improve our weaknesses at times. But I actually subscribe to a different theory on that. There's a book called Smarts, Are We Hardwired for Success by Chuck Martin, and I love the book. There was a webcast I used to be able to use and with mentees that I can't find anymore, unfortunately, but I love the book because Chuck's theory is that we have a set of executive skills. There are 12 of them, and we're good at some things and we're bad at some things. And the things that we're good at, we've always been good at, and the things we're terrible at, we've always been terrible at. And when I read that and heard that, I was like, oh my God, that's right. The things that I'm terrible at, the feedback that I've gotten is the same feedback I've gotten throughout my entire career. Now, people have used different words, but it's the same origin. And it was transforming to me as a manager. When I looked at that, because I remember, I'll tell you a quick story. I had a person that worked for me. And they were really, they owned a lot of the commitments for the group. And their skill set was, they definitely got things done, but they were weak at task initiation, which is one of the executive skills Chuck talked about. And task initiation is one of my strengths, right? If you give me a task, I start it pretty quickly, and I'm really good at that. And so it drove me nuts. I kept trying to make him into me. You need to start things like now he's always got things done. And the thing that frustrated me was that nature of, well, why don't you get things done like I do? It frustrated me, and I was punishing him for this. And then when I read this book, I'm like, why am I punishing him for something that he's always going to be bad at? This is not a skill set. Now, that doesn't mean he didn't need to compensate for that. Sure, he needs to compensate for that. But I changed how I managed it. And I said, look, I'm gonna tell you right now, we're gonna have an agreement. I'm not going to put my values of task initiation on you. You get things done. I'm gonna let you do the things. You're on that. I said, but if you miss, you and I are gonna have a conversation about it. And he said, great. And he went through, and 99% of the time, he did miss once, and literally it was like once, and we had a conversation about it. But he delivered. Now, sometimes it was at the last minute, and it was a little struggle, but he delivered. And so I think that when we look at this and we think about it, it's not about making people, so you're really kind of establishing what is it there, rather than focus on those weaknesses. And Chuck, this is the key of all of this, was Chuck said, don't focus on the weaknesses, focus on the strengths. And so what I would argue when you go for a mentor, if you think, let's say you're a level 100 at some quality, like task initiation, you're level 100, and you're level 10 at, say, working memory. If you improve working memory by 10%, you get to 11. You improve that task initiation by 10, you get to 110, right? You get more out of improving your strengths than you do at addressing your weaknesses. Sometimes you're better off trying to find something where you can limit your weaknesses or compensate for your weaknesses and focus on improving those strengths. So you need to identify what it is you want a mentor to do. And I would encourage you to look at your strengths just as hard as you look at your weaknesses to see if there's ways that you can improve your strengths to get more out of what you do really, really well. That's the first thing. The second thing is decide, what do you want the mentor to be, right? Sometimes I want the mentor to be at a senior executive level. Now, we may all say we want a senior man, that VP or senior VP to coach me. Maybe you don't. Maybe you need someone that's maybe at the same level as you. Or, God forbid, I did a reverse mentoring, one of the best experiences I had. Really, that person helped me a lot at a very critical time in my career. And it was a reverse mentor, someone lower in the levels that gave me that feedback. And really, it was valuable. So again, Your mentor isn't about a level necessarily. It's about getting the skills that they have. And it may be someone that someone outside that's not at the same level as you and lower in the organization even. Again, you're trying to find someone that's really good at something that you're trying to get better at. So I think, again, try to decide, do you want something? Is there a gender? Is there a some other thing, people that have gone through similar experiences of what you're gone through, or what you could go through? There's a lot of different qualities of mentors that you need. And certainly people bring different perspectives to things. So kind of recognize that you may want a certain perspective. And if you do that, find that person that gives you that perspective that's going to help. And the last thing I think really is ask. I have found it's very rare. There's no one has ever turned me down. Whenever I've gone and asked, I would really love to meet with you, and you don't have to make it into we're going to talk forever and this is going to be a forever relationship. No. Focus on the immediacy. Say, look, I'd like to meet with you and talk about it and see where it goes. If it's productive at the end of it, ask. Say, hey, this was really good. Can we meet again? Yeah. And if you want to formalize it, that's great. You can formalize that, and it's not a bad idea to do that, but don't feel like you have to have that formalization. Sometimes 1 or 2 times can be enough to get what you need. But I think really ask. I've never said no to anyone. No. People have said no to me after I've said, okay, what do you want to do? And we kind of talked through and said, am I the best person for you? Well, maybe you're not, Brian. So, and that's okay. I don't ever take any offense by that. The first meeting I have with any potential mentee, I tell them, look, if we do this for any length of time, at any point, if you're done, that's fine. You can leave and we'll agree that we had a great experience and that will be it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the mentor-mentee relationship. A lot of people see it as this very formal, rigid structure, and it doesn't need to be. It could be, like you say, 2 or 3 conversations just to get you from A to B.
Absolutely.
In an area. I mean, it's largely going to be driven by the mentee. I mean, what would you say for mentees that are seeking that mentorship? I guess. Not necessarily where to start, but like, how would you measure, so if there was a certain, you mentioned their task initiative and initiating, and then, anything else, would you seek out like measures of success in terms of progress to identify that actually I'm making track here? Because sometimes for the softer skills, things like that, it can be a bit more difficult to measure.
Yeah, no, and that's right. I think it's really good in any case. You really need to identify what it is. Like we talked about, you're identifying what you're trying to improve, right? The first thing we said, figure out what it is you're trying to get better at. Along those same lines, I think that's a great thing. And you can talk with your mentor about this. You can talk with the person and say, what is it that we should measure in terms of improvement? Mm-hmm. And don't forget that feedback is data, right? I mean, you can go and ask, for the softer skills, for instance, you can get feedback on that from others. And one of the things that I find that can be very valuable when you're looking at feedback is to enlist others to help you. Find that trusted person that gets to see you and say, look, I'm trying to improve on this. And so can you watch and see how I do this and give me feedback on what you see? And I'll tell you one of my little hints that I'll tell when you do that is come up with a signal that only the 2 of you know, right? So let's say like you're in a meeting and I say, I want to really, I think I'm a good presenter, but I like to be better. And one of the things I use a lot. I say it a lot. So I would like you to help me recognize that. So you can obviously tape yourself and listen to yourself so that you can hear it but that's after the fact, right? That's going to be very valuable, but it's after. So I might say, look, when someone's in the audience, give them a little signal and tell them to touch their nose, when they see you doing it, or, tug at their ear or something like that. You can do one of these things that no one else is going to know, but the 2 of you, it gives you feedback in the moment. It's a great way of trying to, and so that's what I try to do is try to get that ideas flowing of other things that you can do.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's little things like that, but I think it really is trying to come up with those measures. Where are you at now, and where are you trying to get to? And to be realistic about that, right? If someone comes to me and they say, I'm a detail-oriented person and I really want to be awesome at, seeing the big picture. Yeah, great. That's wonderful. That we can work on that. But if you're really, really good at detail-orientated, that's your style, is it realistic to be really, really good at the big picture? Probably not. Does it mean you can be good at it? Sure. Everybody, again, I think that's a trainable thing. But you just need to recognize, let's be realistic about what it is you're trying to achieve. Are you really trying to achieve to be really good at the big picture and that be your strength? Or you're really just trying to be able to get yourself out of the weeds and see what the big picture is? Those are 2 very different things. And I think one is very achievable and the other may be a little harder.
Yeah.
But I think you can always find some measure of what you're trying to improve. That's always possible in my book.
Yeah, we could talk about this all day.
I certainly could. No question about it.
No, yeah, I mean, it's a great topic, and I think, and look, I'm excited to start this mentor scheme, and delighted to have you and a number of other people on board who have been there and done that, and I've been really, I guess, impressed and honoured by the amount of people and uptake from people at your level that are willing to give back to the community. So there's to your point, people always say yes, and I think there's so many people that are really excited to help the next generation of quality QA QC leaders.
Yeah,
because
I like to think we're paying it forward, right? I mean, I had people in my career that have, and I remember saying to them, "Oh my God, how can I ever repay you?" And the most common answer I've ever gotten whenever I've made that statement is, and it will be the most common answer that I give as well, is pay it forward. Give it to someone else. When you're sitting in my seat 20 years now plus later, help someone else. Help someone at that point and say, I'm doing this because someone else did this for me. And honestly, that's what I'm doing, is I'm paying back some very wonderful people who were very instrumental in my career and helped me at times that I really needed that help. I can never pay them back for what they did. So the only thing I can do is to honor what they did for me by helping others the same way they did me. And if I have done that, I hope so. And I really credit to you for kind of creating something that is a really big need. So I'm not surprised to see there's been a big uptake from folks like myself as being mentors. I'm also expecting there'll be a really big uptake of people who would love to talk to someone else.
Yeah, no, I agree. I hope so. And well, let's end with this question then, Brian. And I can't remember if I asked you this last time, but who has been in your career? Who's been the biggest? And it might not be, and I'm guessing it won't be just one person. But if you could sort of narrow it down a bit, who would be the biggest inspirations to you in your career so far?
Oh my gosh, that is a hard question to answer, and there's a whole lot of people that deserve to be on this list.
Yeah.
I think about my buddy John McConnell, who taught me. We did the book Six Sigma in the Pharmaceutical Industry, co-authors on that. John, I think I always contact and say about my before meeting John and after meeting John that my career really was changed because of that. So certainly been huge for my career in that aspect. I can't undersell that enough. I mean, he is just really oversell that enough. He really was instrumental in my career. He's a good friend, mentor, all the things that you can think of, and I'm very lucky to have had to work with him. But I do want to, and I've had others along the way: Ray Kaiser, Neil Chenault, some other people, Kent Murphy. These people that a lot of people wouldn't know, but they're very important to me. But I do want to talk about one person in particular. It's my current boss right now. Her name is Karen Netherton. And Karen, what I love about Karen is that Karen is very good about giving feedback. And she'll give you the feedback with really trying it with an offer to help. And I think one of the things I'm really lucky at is Karen gave me some good feedback and gave me some things, the opportunity to work. And the key was, right, she gives you that, you have a choice. Right, you either choose to work on it or you say, I'm not going to do it, or I believe something different. And I made the right choice, and I chose to work on that. And she gave me really good feedback, and it really helped. And I'm here today. Right now, I'm sitting in this chair talking to you about where I'm at today in my career because I got some really good feedback from Karen. I listened to that, and I continued to improve. And she continued to give me feedback, and I continued to improve. And here I am today. And again, it sounds like when people say that, you might think, oh, well, you were in a bad way. No, there are things that I was doing that I was really good at, and she was helping me get better at, right? We talked about that as developing your strengths. That's what she was really doing for me. It wasn't fixing weaknesses. It was fixing strengths and not even fixing as much as enhancing strengths. And so that's, I think, the key that people miss is that don't focus on those negatives all the time. Focus on those positives too, and the things that you can grow in those strengths that make a big difference. And so I think when I look back at all those people I mentioned, Karen and John and Neil and Kent and all these people that I've got, it's really about them seeing the positives in me and seeing what could be. And really kind of that. And I mentioned Vas Mavrogenis, I missed him as well on that list. And another person that kind of, again, saw those things that I could be good at and found ways to help me be better. Those are the people that you got to treasure.
Brilliant. Brian, another fascinating conversation for the second time. Thanks so much for coming on again.
Well, Hemish,
always come away feeling energized, positive, and learning stuff after we speak. So I appreciate your time.
I will look forward to being the first 3-time participant as
well. There's good money on you being the first time participant. So maybe a year from now we'll go for the trilogy.
I can guarantee I would have learned a lot by the trilogy. I think let's hope we end a little like Return of the Jedi and not like some other options for there.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, great to speak to you, Brian. Thanks again, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks so much, Hamish. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you for listening to today's show. I hope that you got value from it, whether you're starting your career in quality or if you're at the top of your field. Today's episode was brought to you by RX Group. I'm the founder of RX Group. We are a pharma and biotech recruitment organization focusing purely on quality assurance. We recruit consultants and senior level permanent quality professionals into the pharma and biotech industry. If we can support you, whether that be in a hiring capacity or if you yourself are looking for work, please get in touch with me on LinkedIn, visit our LinkedIn page where you can subscribe to the podcast, and visit our website, www.rx-group.io, to find out more about us. See you soon.